Ooh, virtual background.
Yeah. All right. That is not what I want. Okay. Well, we will just give folks one more minute, since I know that we are slightly over, but just in case people are still logging on. Okay. So it looks like we have hit a critical mass of attendees. No more coming in, so we will go ahead and get started. Well, everybody who is joining as an attendee, welcome. We are very excited to have you be part of the first of one of 3 panels on institutional debt forgiveness for the National Governors Association's Educate for Opportunity virtual site visit to the state of Ohio. Just to kick things off, to go over our agenda for this particular session, and I should just say at the top too that this is being recorded so that we would be able to share this in the future. We will first have a quick overview and introduction by me. We will then transition to Melanie Dablin from Detroit, Don Medley from Wayne State in the Warrior Way Back program, and then Mike Duffey to provide some context on Ohio and conclude with some question and answer sessions. So first off, my name is John Elfuth, and I am a policy analyst at the National Governors Association, and I am the team lead for the National Governors Association on the Ohio Educate for Opportunity team. So what all does that mean, you might ask? Well, first of all, the National Governors Association, we were founded in 1908 and serve as the voice of the nation's governors in our capital, Washington, D.C. Additionally, the National Governors Association serves as a think tank of sorts for the governors around the country. In addition to acting as their voice, we also help provide both short and long-term technical assistance opportunities to governors of the 55 states and territories. This particular program is called Educate for Opportunity, and Ohio is one of 6 participating states. If I had to summarize in one word, goal of this program is really to help governors connect their post-secondary systems to workforce outcomes. The more detailed objective is to broadly increase upward mobility for Americans by supporting stronger pathways between education and work. So we are working to assist states to identify successful program models and scale them, clarify the roles governors play in both coordinating post-secondary education and the workforce, facilitating state creation of innovative programs, and demonstrating how states can identify new outcome metrics for adult-focused post-secondary education. So one of the pieces of the Educate for Opportunity program is looking at how students with some college but no degree are being impacted by outstanding debt that they may hold at institutions that they previously attended. So as a part of our virtual site visit, which we're holding over the next couple of days to engage with teams from Educate for Opportunity, we are going to be working together and providing a couple of different panels. Thank you also for my colleague, Melanie, who just flagged for me that the slides had not come up yet. I thought I'd shared the screen, but I clearly did not. So you can see here on the screen the goals for Educate for Opportunity. Melanie, looks good to you? Great. Moving forward, I'm going to go ahead and transition to my colleague from Detroit, Melanie, who is going to talk a bit about some national context for programs that focus on institutional debt forgiveness. And then she'll talk a bit more about some of the work that they're doing in Detroit. Melanie, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. It's a real honor to be joining you all. So if you can go just to the next slide, Detroit Drives Degrees is an initiative that's housed in the Detroit Regional Chamber, and it brings together leaders in business, leaders in education, leaders in philanthropy and government, all with a common mission. And that is to pursue 2 goals. The first is to increase education attainment to 60% by the year 2030. And the second equally important goal is to reduce the racial equity gaps in education attainment during that same time period. And I know there are a lot of similarly situated organizations in Ohio. And actually, one of our colleagues on the Detroit Choice Degree staff lives in Toledo, so I feel like I have a special connection to you all as a sister state here. But it's just an honor to be part of this. I really appreciate John's invitation, and it's been great working with Mike and Stephanie in organizing this. So moving on, I thought it would be helpful to just take a step back before we talk about the topic at hand, which is institutional debt forgiveness, to just talk more broadly about our strategy to kind of engage adult students. And for us, you know, that work really was prompted by a Talent Hub designation that we were honored to receive in 2018. I know there are 3 other Talent Hub cities in Ohio with Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Dayton, I believe. But there are 23 national talent hubs, and this was an honor that the Kresge and Lumina Foundation worked up to forge partnerships between community organizations like the one I work for, the Detroit Chamber, and higher ed institutions to target specific populations. And we chose adults with some college but no degree as our primary target. And you can see here there is sort of national sort of justification to back that up. 1 in 5 adults across the United States dropped out before they earned a degree or credential. About half of the state of Michigan's some college no degree population resides in the Detroit region. So we felt like, from our perspective as kind of representing employers, this was sort of a real issue that we wanted to work on. And I'll harp back to this, continue on this kind of theme, but I think there's a real unique opportunity here to engage not only higher ed institutions, but also sort of employers in this work, because the way to activate and engage adults really is through employers, right? And so we felt that that was sort of a comparative advantage we had. And so our efforts to better support adults has sort of a threefold focus. One is providing greater financial supports, addressing academic barriers, and providing advising supports. But really, and as you will see when Dawn talks about this in a moment, like the crown jewel of our adult focus work really has been debt forgiveness and the Warrior Way Back initiative that Wayne State University envisioned. So next slide. Dawn will get into greater detail about this, but I feel like it might be helpful to kind of define in loose terms what we're talking about when we talk about debt forgiveness. And it's great to see kind of all of you kind of join today and the great interest in this topic. So the way Warrior Way Back has been structured is that it provides up to $1,500 of debt relief for individuals who that provides a barrier for them from re-enrolling. So $500 each semester. And so what we did here is, after Warrior Way Back was launched in 2018, we did a region-wide inventory of other institutions, 5 other institutions in Detroit, to see if financial barriers or financial holds were kind of a regional problem rather than just an issue that sort of had been important to Wayne State stop-outs. And we found that about a quarter of stop-outs, we kind of looked at about 100,000 student records, a quarter of them had some sort of financial holds on their accounts. And what I love about these statistics is, like, you know, a lot of common narratives that you hear sometimes that, oh, maybe they've expended their Pell eligibility, that like really was not true here, or that, you know, there wasn't a substantial number of credits already under the belts of these students. Like, you know, a good chunk of them, almost half of them, had 24 credits a full year, right? So I think what this regional inventory did was really catalyze not just an interest from Wayne State, but an interest region-wide to do something meaningful about addressing institutional debt. And I've underscored this kind of the equity imperative that we saw here. Really notable findings for us was that even though African-American stop-outs constituted only 21% of the overall population, they were almost half of the stop-outs who had financial holds. So if we were serious about kind of doing something to address racial equity, this was kind of a clear as path as any to meaningfully address that. So we did this inventory. It was quite a dramatic event. Don was in the meeting, and we gathered all these university presidents, and we had them each bring their data, and they looked at this. And at that meeting was a commitment was born to expand the Warrior Way Back program to include more institutions. And so the next slide shows a picture of our kind of press announcement at that, with kind of the heads of all these institutions and a representative from our governor's office here. And I know Mike would want me to talk a little bit about specifics about what kind of constitutes our debt forgiveness compact. So we identified 3 core tenets for this agreement. The first was that it was unlimited, that every institution was going to offer debt forgiveness to as many students who wanted to take advantage of that. The second is that we kind of provided flexibility to accommodate both community colleges and four-year institutions. When we're talking about debt, there's obviously significant differences between 2-year and 4-year institutions in terms of the amount of money that may be owed. And so what made sense for our community college partner was that they would forgive up to half of the debt owed, even if that was above $1,500 in the case of Henry Ford College's case. And then our 4-year partners, Oakland University and Wayne State University, agreed to use that $1,500 floor that Wayne State had already established for the amount of forget. And then the way we addressed reciprocity was we made it such that all institutions agreed that if an individual wanted to enroll elsewhere rather than their former institution, all that student needed to do was enroll in a payment plan, and then that would allow them to receive their transcript and enroll wherever they'd like. So our debt forgiveness compact was born, and I think on the next slide, I'd like to talk about just how meaningful that was for our community, and specifically the business community. I think when the higher eds in Detroit kind of took this step and sort of, I remember a number of business leaders saying, if they're going to take these strides, it's time for us to also do our part. And so we expanded the notion of a compact to not just be specific to this debt forgiveness component, but to be a broader sort of visioning for how we are going to kind of increase economic opportunity across the region. And we have about 10 large employers, including Ford Motor Company and DTE Energy, who have signed on to this compact. And every single one of our employer compact signatories have some sort of either loan forgiveness program. A lot of them didn't have that before, but kind of added that because of this effort, or a tuition assistance program. So I think it just goes to say that if you do big things in higher ed, that sort of is, and at least in our case in Detroit, has been a catalyst for a broader community effort. All right, so the next slide talks a little bit about the proliferation that we've seen, and I think Don will talk about this too, but we have been deeply humbled and really proud of the way that our work in Detroit has kind of catalyzed a nationwide movement really around debt forgiveness. Just a few examples of states here. Missouri, the Missouri Scholarship and Loan Foundation actually provided grant funding to do up to $3,000 of debt forgiveness, topping our $1,500. We need to kind of up it, continue the competition here. Now we're competing with you all potentially in Ohio, but that program has been great. It's been statewide and has been especially important, I think, in the kind of wake of COVID, with a lot of displaced workers that have benefited from that. In Indiana, Ivy Tech has a Fresh Start debt forgiveness program that I think they told me just rolled out maybe this year. There's also another consortium of about 10 private and public four-year institutions that are have developed a true reciprocity, where no matter where you enrolled, you can enroll in any one of those 10 institutions and get your debt forgiven. Texas, Alamo College District, a community college district there, has a debt forgiveness program. Pennsylvania had this really interesting innovation where they worked with a nonprofit to provide funding for provide debt forgiveness for those who were interested in going into early childhood and pursuing a career there, because they had a shortage there, which I thought was sort of a unique take on this. And then California just late last year passed a law actually preventing and prohibiting the use of withholding transcripts as a debt forgiveness or as a debt collection tool, which was a monumental step. So this has been really exciting to see, and we're proud to be a part of it. I think I'd like to just reiterate some of the case making in the next slide for debt forgiveness. We've talked about, I think, one of the biggest challenges we all are confronting right now in higher ed is, what can be done with diminished budgets. And what I love about this intervention is, as Dawn will talk about as soon as I hand the reins over to her, there is a proven ROI on this. And so, that needn't hinder progress on this. And similarly, I think there are few interventions that have such a compelling kind of business case for it, as well as sort of an equity-driven mission. And I cited this statistic that I heard recently that a professor from Stanford shared. There's actually a lower rate of white students who drop out of college have a lower rate, a default rate, than Black students who actually earn their bachelor degrees. So this issue of institutional debt is, as I've mentioned, is a significant one, and anything we can do to kind of address that, I think, promotes what all sort of compels us to this work in terms of creating educational opportunity. I included this calculator over here. So the Institute for Higher Education Policy actually produced an ROI calculator. So if you're at an institution and you are considering launching a debt forgiveness initiative, I encourage you to go to their website and use this. You type in all of the information that's specific to your institution, including sort of the cost per credit hour and how your student population, and then it does those calculations for you, which can be helpful when you're having those conversations with CFOs and trying to see if this makes business sense for your institution. And I think I'd like to just wrap up by talking about what next steps I see for us in the Detroit region. I'm sure a lot of you are hungering for kind of specifics about what this looks like in your institution, and just to foreshadow what John already shared, that's what Dawn is kind of going to get into. But in terms of our larger regional compact, I think what's next for us is really being thoughtful about what the outreach strategy looks like. Is it more effective for us to kind of collectively address all of the regional stop outs, and rather than having Wayne State send emails to all of them, say, you know, maybe it's us or our affiliate employers saying, you know, we really care about your future, and, you know, we have this opportunity for debt forgiveness for you. You know, is there a differentiation in terms of the response rate, depending on who the messenger is? Similarly, there's we're looking at kind of adopting a much more sophisticated way of conducting outreach to students, kind of using recent contact information, using AI technology, and sort of a lot of like marketing partners that are out there that can help us do that at a regional scale. On our agenda is also enhancing kind of the reciprocity arrangement that I hope maybe the discussion will kind of lead us into today. We'd love it to be more than just you know, enroll in a payment plan and then you can go elsewhere. We think there's sort of an opportunity to kind of deepen that aspect of our partnership. And then thirdly, we are kind of engaged with the RAND Corporation right now on potentially doing a randomized control trial of this intervention, with a number of questions. I mean, I think we're really interested in how to potentially increase take-up, but also learning, like, what is the optimal amount of debt forgiveness that could be offered? What is that tipping point that would really propel a student to return, and does that vary depending on their income or sort of other demographic factors? So if that's of interest to you all, please stay in touch. We'd love to kind of leverage whatever we learn, you know, and share that with you, and we would only ask that you do the same with us if you move forward with this. So with that, I think I will hand you all over to my esteemed colleague, Don Medley from Wayne State, who is such a great champion for this cause. And we'll talk about what they've done at Wayne State University.
All right, thanks, Melanie. First and foremost, I just want to thank John for pulling this picture. I think it's at least 10 years old, and it's also with a haircut and a color, which I haven't had the opportunity to have since COVID. So I'm really feeling the positive vibes there. And I also want to thank, you know, Mike and Stephanie and just NGA for having us so that we could talk about this program. As you can tell from Melanie, and I hope you'll be able to tell from me, I absolutely love this, and it really, you know, I think all of us in our professional career, we hope someday to make a ripple that goes out and flows out from what we've done professionally. And I'm just okay if Warrior Way Back becomes my ripple, because I feel that good about it, and I feel really good about the opportunity to create generational change in educational attainment. And so that's just been amazing. So I wouldn't want to skip over the fact that Lumina and Kresge have really supported so much of this work and allowed us to do this. And then I've had a phenomenal opportunity to work at Wayne State University in the heart of Detroit. And my boss departed the institution about 3 weeks ago to go be the president at the university at UNLV, Keith Whitfield. But he has been a champion of this program from the get-go. And so even though he's not my boss anymore, I do always want to make sure that I acknowledge him, because he's been a huge proponent of this, as has our president, Roy Wilson, just really, really innovative and creative thinkers. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll start talking a little bit about Warrior Way Back and tell you kind of how we got where we are. So we can go again one more. There we are. So as every enrollment manager on this call knows, we in the Midwest, and especially Michigan, Ohio as well, and then Detroit, we are ground zero for the declining high school graduation rate. And so as we continue to try and meet our enrollment goals that a lot of presidents have set out for us, maybe CFOs have said this is what we need in order to support our institution financially, we know as enrollment management folks that that's really difficult, because there's not a bigger pipeline coming from high school graduation. People didn't make babies 18 years ago, so there's not a lot of freshmen for us to be recruiting. So when we were talking about this and we were working, you know, thinking about what group could we engage with, we really started to look at those adults who had some college but who hadn't been able to successfully complete their degree. And so I'll draw your attention to this slide. If you will look at that pink band, that is the national education crisis. And you can see how many students in their 20s have some college and no degree, and that number begins to taper off as you go toward the 60, 70, and 80. That doesn't mean that we're fixing the crisis. It means that people are dying without attaining their college education. And so we need to do something to improve that. You can see that, you know, we have a lot of folks who have no diplomas and everything, but it's really that pink group in that middle there that we felt we could really exert change on. And the thing that I would add to this is, you know, you hope in your generation or in your lifetime that you have a really good idea. And so some of you are old enough that you remember the pet rock, and people created a rock literally with eyes on it, and they sold it, and people spent a lot of money. And that was a great marketing. Then some of you will also remember there was a singing fish that hung on your wall, and that was a great marketing tool. And then a lot of women on the call, and some of the men, you're very familiar with Spanx, and that was a great idea. So I feel like in many, many ways, Warrior Way Back was just waiting for somebody, because it's a very simple idea. It's a simple implementation, and it has tremendous return on investment. And when I thought of it, honestly, based on somebody talking about library loan forgiveness for fines, and then also the parking problem that we had in the city of Detroit. And what that parking problem was you would get a ticket for parking your car, and then you get another ticket for parking your car, and then they would impound your car. You would lose your job because you couldn't drive to work, and they would continue to mount fines on top of your car. And so somebody came through and said, you know, that's really not making a lot of sense. Why don't we go ahead and release people and let them have their cars back so they can go and work their jobs, and then maybe they can pay the fines? And I was like, wouldn't that be a really neat concept if we could do that? You know, like the library does a book forgiveness day. We have these parking forgiveness. Wouldn't that be really cool if we could do that with student debt? And that's exactly how we got to this idea. So if you want to go to the next slide. Melanie talked a little bit about the economic impact of this. And I guess for me, I understand the economic impact, and I've been very grateful to have the Detroit partnership. But I really felt like at Wayne State, we had a moral imperative. So we had a period of time where we were enrolling a lot of students, and I'll talk about that. But as higher education administrators, we've been kind of selling the dream. We've been encouraging students that, you know, they can get a Pell Grant, and we tell them they're admissible to our institution. And then when they're not successful, we let them leave, they owe us money, and then we begin to really hold that transcript hostage. And so with the $1.4 million that we had in the state of Michigan, and a student owing between $5,000 and $8,000, think about it. Right now in the state of Michigan, you have to work 79 hours a week at a minimum wage job to actually be able to support one parent with a school-age child and a preschooler. Okay, 79 hours. So if you drop out of school and you owe between $5,000 and $8,000 and you're working a minimum wage job, how are you ever going to pay that debt off? How are you ever going to be able to move ahead in your education? That's why you see the loan default rate at 17%. So not only are we demanding immediate repayment in full, we're not allowing them to re-enroll, we're putting them into collections, and we're damaging their credit, thereby causing them to pay higher interest rates, maybe not get an apartment where, you know, they can walk to work or live close to work, and maybe not even be able to get a vehicle to go to work. The other thing is a lot of employers now check credit ratings. We were ruining students' credit ratings, and they weren't able to get jobs. It just is not a good formula for success, and it's not who we want to be as higher education institutions. Next slide. So everybody talks about the national student loan crisis, and what I would say is we don't have a student loan crisis. We have a lack of funding for higher education in our nation. And you'll notice right in here, Michigan and Ohio, we are right beside each other. So you can look and see how, even accounting for inflation, we have seen the decrease in state funding, but none of you at your higher education institutions have you seen your costs go down, right? So we're seeing our costs go up and we're seeing our state funding go down. The other thing that we've seen is that students' Pell Grants haven't increased. We haven't seen significant increases in their ability to get supplemental educational grants. So as our costs go up and our state funding goes down, who's bridging that middle? It's students, and they're having to borrow money, and they're having to borrow more money. When I went to college in the 80s, I'm old, but when I went to college in the 80s, I could work my lifeguard job in the summer. I could work 15 hours a week in the school cafeteria. I got a Pell Grant, and between all of that and what I was able to, work on the side or whatever with my student loan, I could pay for my housing, my tuition, my fees, and my books. Right now, if a student gets a Pell Grant and a student loan at most public institutions, it does not cover their tuition and fees, let alone books and transportation. And that's why we have a problem. Students are having to borrow more money to go to school, and then when they're not completing, they're saddled with that debt. Next slide. So this is a slide that I always put in my presentation, and people are like, oh my God, why on earth would you put dead fish in your presentation? But bear with me. So I love to fish, and when I approach a river or a stream or a lake or a pond, and I actually like to fish more in a lake or a pond. I fish bluegill, bass, catfish in the evenings. But if I walked up to a pond and this is what I saw, I would not stand on the side of the pond and berate the fish and say, why didn't you swim faster? Or why didn't you pick better food? Or why didn't you go where there was more oxygen? But in higher education, we stand on the bank and we blame students. We say, why didn't you pick your classes? Why didn't you do better? Why didn't you go to office hours? And as institutions, we don't need to blame the fish. We need to actually examine the water. And I think that Warrior Way Back is us kind of correcting that and making sure, because when those students entered into an agreement with us as their educator, we guaranteed that we would support them, and we didn't always do that. Next slide. So this is the other reason. So when we talk a little bit about why we do this, we have a moral imperative, but for the enrollment managers out there, you also have kind of a bottom line imperative. So you are faced with declining potential of new freshman enrollment. Really the market you need to be looking at to increase is your adult students. You need to be looking at those students who have some college, no degree. And the easiest students to bring back are the students who already started with your institution. And the best way that you can be successful as an enrollment manager is to hang on to those students that you get. Everybody knows 2023 and beyond, that's when it really starts to hit the decline in the Midwest. And a lot of us are not old enough to hit retirement before that. So I'm encouraging you as enrollment management professionals and higher education leaders to really expand who you're looking at. And again, the easiest way is to bring back those students who weren't successful the first time. Next slide. So Wayne State, we had an issue. As you can see, we actually scored Time Magazine in 2011, and we were put on Time Magazine as the New York Times actually, as the institution in the nation with the worst graduation rate. So we had a crisis, and we had a crisis that we needed to correct. But my peer, I call her my work wife, Monica Brockmeyer, every time she would show this slide and I was in the audience, I was highlighted on that 26% because I was like, wow, that's really low. But that wasn't the number I saw. In my mind, I kept going, what happened to those other 74%? Where are they? Because here at Wayne State, a large majority of our students come to us from within 30 miles. I figured those students were really there. So then we began to look at, as our graduation rates went up, and now actually this year we're right at 52%. I think we'll be 51.8 when we publish next week. So we've been increasing. We were recognized by APLU. It's wonderful. Look, you're increasing your graduation rates. And I would sit there and I would go, what happened to those students that we were left with debt? What happened to those students who didn't graduate? And that kind of weighed on me really heavily. Next slide. And that's where we got to Warrior Way Back. Again, it's really like Spanx. I cannot believe that nobody had thought of this before because it's very simple. When I came up with the idea, I literally did, I tell people I pulled out my big button calculator and I went and I took it to our CFO and I took it to the provost and I said, I really think we can make this work and I think that we can have a positive return on investment. So this allows students to re-engage with higher education. We are the only industry that locks people out. Even if you have bad debt, you can buy a car. If you have bad debt, you can get furniture. If you have bad debt, you can get housing. If you have bad debt with us, we say, no, we don't want you anymore. We're not willing to negotiate. This allows us to negotiate and change that. This offers an opportunity for students who truly are committed to come back, and they can learn their way back to an education. And we also provide a lot of personalized guidance. When these students stopped out of Wayne State before, we were not the same institution that we are now as far as student support and student caring and just student engagement. Next slide. So this aligned with our Lumina Talent Hub designation. It also was picked up by Governor Whitmer, who's been incredibly supportive. It allows us to help, really address our students in our local area. And the other thing it does, financial aid professionals will know that if you can't enroll, you can't access your current student aid. So you cannot take federal student dollars and apply them to a previous semester. So this allows us to free up students to still be able to access veterans benefits, employer benefits, federal financial aid benefits. Imagine being an employee whose boss is saying, I want you to go and get your degree, and you would have to tell that employer, I can't do it because I already owe a bill to that institution. So I wouldn't want to put a student in that situation, and that's what we were doing. Next slide. So really easy qualifications. The reason that we selected that a student has to be out of school for 2 years is that's when we write off the debt and it no longer bounces against our books. That could be individually customized to your own institution, and we've seen it a lot of different iterations. We require a student to have a GPA of 2.0 or above. We fudge on that a little. What we're really looking to see is, does that student have an opportunity for satisfactory academic progress and progression toward degree? And that's what we're looking for. We picked $1,500 or less only because that if a student owes us $1,499 and they're a current student, we allow them to enroll for the next semester. So that was just easiest for our bursar's office to be consistent. And we do require that a student file a FAFSA. And the reason is a lot of these students never cleared verification before, and so they never got their financial aid before. So that's why we want to make sure that we get them through this time. Next slide. So admitted student requirements, we ask that they get a C or better in each class. We like for them to have a 2.5 semester GPA, and the reason, because again, that's progression toward degree. We ask that they be enrolled continuously 3 out of 4 semesters. We didn't want to put 3 in there because spring, summer, people are at home with their children. We wanted to make sure that they had a breather if they needed it. Again, these are adult students managing their lives, their children, their work. We didn't want to be a burden. We do require that they continue to be taking coursework for graduation. We have difficult conversations. If you have 90 hours and you're pre-nursing at Wayne State, that's not going to happen. But you know what might happen? You might be able to get a public health degree or a bachelor's in psychology. We are looking at the shortest time to degree completion for these students. And you have to meet all your ongoing financial and account information obligations as we go through the process. Next slide. So this is the good stuff. So all of those who are out there who are CPAs or the financial officers, this is real and it's true. And I'm an English major. The cost benefit analysis was pretty simple for me. We have enrolled 191 students. We've had 43 students graduate. We've also had a high number of students who complete the program with the 3 semesters of enrollment. Once they complete the program, they can take their transcript anywhere they want to go. They can, continue on, but they're done with the Warrior Way Back program as far as we're concerned. We're still supporting them, but they've cleared their obligation. And since the fall of 2018, we've had $1 million of positive ROI. And the way we calculate that is the tuition and fees that they're bringing into the institution minus any debt that we forgave or debt that, we had to assume, plus any outstanding balance that the students still owe us. 74% of our Warrior Way Back students have high or financial need even after they return to the institution. And these are working adults for the most part because the average age is 39. 88% of them are people of color, and 67% of them are seniors at Wayne State. So they were that close to their degree and they didn't do it. The other thing is with the average age of 39, guess what happens? A lot of them have children that are looking for college and looking to make a decision about where they're going to get their degree from. Previously, we were seen as the debt collector and they didn't want to take our calls. Now we're seen as the institution that has their back, and they're telling their son or daughter, nope, you're going to go to Wayne State because Wayne State had my back. We could not have changed that narrative any other way than this program. Next slide. So I will go ahead and I will turn it over to Mike Duffey. And again, Mike, thanks so much for having me here.
Thanks. I feel like we have the dream team with Wayne State and the Detroit regional partnership that have worked so much on this issue. And the fact that, as I just learned the other day, that you guys have a compact going up in Michigan that I wasn't even aware of when we were thinking about doing a compact here in Ohio. I'll start with a little bit of point of origin. I know some of the people on the call were involved in this, but our experience in Ohio goes back to at least 2017, when then Attorney General, now Governor Mike DeWine, convened a student loan debt advisory group report. And we looked at many different facets of debt, mostly coming up with about 22 recommendations that came out of that were like prophylactic, preventative about having debt. And of course, that's great, but there's a really long tail on that. You know, the action and the value that can be extracted for students takes a long time to occur. And it's forward-looking. It doesn't have a lot of immediate value for the institutions. And so what we really want to do, and what we kind of focused on, and I know it came, and I think Pete Van Leer may even be participating today, is to think about what's actionable right now. And I think about the Merchant of Venice saying, when Lancelot says, it's not for nothing. And it really is not for nothing. It's not that you're forgiving debt for nothing. You're getting something coming in. And that's the value proposition that really, I think, is the powerful win-win that's all around, that exists here, that we hope to stand something up in Ohio that would be modeled a little bit off of what you're doing, that ripple, expanding, and a legacy. I think that legacy is secure because it was what we were talking about. Wayne State and Warrior Way Back has been the dominant piece of the conversation for us in Ohio as we've talked about how to approach this. So how do you tap into that existing population? Then a little bit more context on this is we were talking about Educate for Opportunity, or we talk about with Ohio Excels, the attainment goal for Ohio, which is 65% by 2025. The impossibility, the mathematical impossibility of achieving that goal on the basis of high school graduates, that you have to get to the adult population in order to achieve that. And so that pink band that you talked about and really wanting to target that to us should be a very attractive, target-rich, live fish environment for our institutions who are all suffering from declining enrollment, both as a macro trend across the United States and exacerbated by COVID. So then, same logical process that you guys went through, you're just farther along in the maturity arc. And where I'd like to think that this could go at some point is, we like to have a rivalry between Ohio and Michigan. Maybe you have a tiny bit of a lead on us on this, but we would like to catch up and maybe rival you in some respects, in that we would like to pattern this across the entire system if we could possibly do that. That would be the aspirational goal. If not that, just a very large participant compact group where it is a win for them financially to be able to get these students back, but we have to get out of our own way to encourage these students to have enough of an impetus to want to come back. Now, let me give you a scenario that emerged that's based on current Ohio law as it relates to the way that we collect debt in the state of Ohio. And this emerged out of the 2017 Columbus Dispatch series that was a multi-part series. And the reality is that once debt is certified, so the institution has a deadline in the state of Ohio, 13102 is the Ohio Revised Code section, says 45 days after the debt's due, you certify it. Anybody that's with an institution that's on this call, you're familiar with that statute. So it's sent to the AG's office. Immediately, there's a fee at the AG's office that's about 10 or 11%. And then it goes to a third-party vendor, and their cost is roughly 18% on top of that. So there's an imputed interest on that certified debt amount that's about 30% from day one, which is why we focus so much on preventative measures such as financial literacy, telling students about not delaying and not letting it get to the certification point of getting to the AG and all of that. But many of those debt amounts can be for relatively nominal amounts of debt. So a student could have completed college for 2 years, paid tuition, paid room and board, you know, they've maybe got $40,000-$50,000 in, it's all fully paid for, and then they do something that incurs some kind of debt to the institution. The institution becomes a creditor. It could be an unpaid library fine. To your point, as an example that you gave earlier, it could be room and board. It could be a lot of different things that are credits extended, but it's nominal amount in the total scheme of things. But then it gets this imputed 30% charge on top of it. And now suddenly the student might be put into an emotional position to just be avoid it. Just avoid it, avoid it, avoid it. And they're not returning the debt collector's calls. They're not returning anyone else's calls. Now I want to, let's say, grab that student and bring them back in and rescue them and say, it's time to complete. They've stopped out for a period of time. Maybe they've started a family. They've got a new job. They've got income. I want to bring them back into the system. What is the most difficult obstacle for that? For the institution, it's, especially if it's cross-institutional, what do I do about your old debt? And that is a skeleton for the student that is very difficult to face, especially if they feel like the amount has ballooned to an amount that they don't recognize. They thought that they owed $100. Somehow it's got interest on it now, and it's become $150 or it's become $200. And they feel kind of wrong. They feel like it's good money after bad, that kind of thing. And so they're unwilling to kind of come back into the system. And so it's not for nothing is to say like, well, that's a lost prospect and opportunity for our institutions. We see it, and an opportunity for us in that if they came back and they enrolled as a relatively full-time student, we could be getting thousands of dollars of tuition out of them, combating decline enrollment, helping them complete. And so out of that, what is our incremental cost? We have a lot of fixed costs in higher education. We've got buildings and we've got faculty. Those are not necessarily linear to the variable cost of a student. And so we want more students. And really, it doesn't necessarily cost us $10,000 to enroll that additional student. So if we can get into a pattern where we could get that $10,000 potentially in new revenue from tuition and revenue, and forgive a $1,500 amount, then we're still ahead. We're still way ahead on economies of scale as it relates to the institution's enrollment goals. And so if we can do that in a win-win way, that's what we want to do. I think, cross-institutional debt is the current frontier that you talked about, Don and Melanie, and that's what I really get excited about. I think if you want to get into the brains of every Ohioan and you want them to get thinking about coming back, we need to have some uniformity and we need to have brand awareness. It needs to have critical mass so everyone knows kind of what the terms and conditions are. Because if it's a hodgepodge, it's just more difficult. And I will say, and I do want to speak to, and I've consulted with Michelle Chavon, who's our legal counsel at the Ohio Department of Higher Ed, that there is the possibility today for your institution to do this if you want to. It just is a little complicated. 131.02, 1E2 and F allow the college to set up payment plans, allow the college and the Attorney General to jointly agree to compromise the debt, to settle the debt, those kinds of things. So you can do those things today. And if there's anybody on the call who wants to do that as an institution and you don't want to wait for somebody else, please call us because we will help you through the process. But we believe, and I don't want to put words in the mouth of the Attorney General's office, but we believe that having a program that's relatively uniform from a statewide perspective that could be a compact is really exciting because it makes the process so much easier. You know that if the Attorney General has approved that compact, that you don't need to ask permission, that it doesn't have to be a custom transaction. You don't have to go through all of that. And we can similarly attest to you, and it exists in the Ohio Administrative Code, that a student has to be in a repayment plan in order to get state share of instruction subsidy, SSI. And so we want you to be able to qualify SSI for that student, and you need to have them in a repayment plan. And if we could get some kind of Warrior Way Back compact going on in the state of Ohio, we think that we could satisfy all of those criteria, make the student eligible for SSI, and make it an easier process and allow the institutions to avoid the hassle of having to have conversations with the Attorney General's office back and forth.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike and Don and Melanie, for all of that wonderful information. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we proceed to the question and answer session. I'm going to go ahead and stop the slide deck so we can all see each other's faces as we actually answer questions. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand, or you can also type it into the chat box. Either of those is good. And it looks like we've had a number of different questions pop up so far. So I'm going to go ahead and just proceed in the order that the questions were asked. So the first question comes from Cindy McQuaid. The question was, what happens if a student doesn't comply? And what about a student whose debt is above $1,500?
So I'll go ahead and take that. So, you know, it's really simple. It's exactly what happens anytime a student doesn't comply with anything. So we try to intervene. We try to make sure that we offer corrective measures, and we try to steer students. And so we have not only a coordinator in the program, it's a half-time position in my office in enrollment management, but we also have a half-time advisor position. And they are there as coach, as cheerleader, and sometimes as enforcer. And so they really work with the students to try to make sure that they're doing what they need to do, that we're meeting expectations, and that everybody understands what the goal is. So if a student, you know, just really kind of walks away and doesn't want to participate, and we have had two since this started, you know, basically they got their financial aid, they got their refund, and they ghosted us. Immediately, all that debt goes back onto their record again, and that's it. You know, they had their re-engagement chance, they made a choice again, and sometimes, you know, you can't fix when people really want to make, you know, bad choices. The other part of that is, what about students whose debt is above $1,500? That has probably been adult student re-engagement. That's been one of the biggest and best side benefits that we completely didn't expect. We're having students come to us who owe like $3,200 or owe like over $4,000, and they'll say, but if I pay this down to this $1,500 amount, can I become eligible? And the answer is yes. But what we do, because we don't want to have any bad relationship, we make sure that before they ever start paying that debt down, because those are significant amounts of money for them, or maybe they're going to a relative to borrow, we make sure they're eligible for the program in all other areas. And then we say, yeah, we believe that you are eligible. Go ahead and start paying down that debt. And when you get to $1,500, we will welcome you back into the Warrior Way back. The other benefit that we didn't expect is those people who didn't owe us any money, and they just didn't know necessarily how to re-engage with the institution. But because of the press we received with this program, they raised their hand and said they'd like to come back. So with the press announcement at the Mackinac Policy Conference, is put on by the Detroit Chamber, and our president making this announcement, we had almost 1,000 students raise their hand that they'd like to re-engage and return to Wayne State. So I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised with the amount of adult student re-engagement you'll get, and even those who don't owe you a bill.
Thanks, Dawn. And that was actually a two-parter question. So the second question, and I'll direct it to either Dawn or Melanie, whoever would like to respond, is how does the compact work? The question was, how does the indebted higher education institution that may be holding debt benefit from a student enrolling at another one, if I'm understanding the question correctly?
Yeah, so I can take that, and I'll say where we are now, and then sort of aspirationally where we'd like to be. Mike, jump in if you have any comments on what might be applicable to the Ohio context. So right now we have an arrangement where there isn't yet true reciprocity, I would say. It's just simply an agreement among the participating institutions that have debt forgiveness programs that they will release transcripts as long as that student is enrolled in a payment program. I think where we'd like to be, and like how we're hoping to evolve this, is that we develop either some sort of tuition share model, or Dawn has sort of often drawn upon kind of the tuition exchange model, where we track how many students are transferring to and from institutions, and we ensure that an arrangement would make every institution whole at the end of the year financially in terms of that exchange. But those are sort of just being totally candid, because our comments here today are aimed at sort of, you know, helping your institutions. We haven't yet arrived at kind of, I think, where we'd like to be in terms of the reciprocal agreements.
Dawn, did you want to add anything to that?
I would only say that I've not given up yet. So I'm real hopeful that I can make that work. And actually, I don't want to make it just work for Michigan. I want to take it nationally. And I think that there is a true, desire and a true opportunity for us to really make this a national program and really kind of change the trajectory of those adults, getting their college degree. So I haven't given up.
Good to hear. So our next question is, what happens if the student does not continue to enroll? And I'm thinking, Dawn and Melanie, feel free to respond as you will.
So for us, if a student chooses not to enroll, I think it depends. So we have a student maybe who enrolls and does 2 semesters, and so they get $1,000, forgiven. And then sometimes students will choose then to pay off the remainder and go somewhere else to school. Or, it gets it down to a manageable amount for them. And so we have some students, we still consider that, they completed the program and they did what they needed. As I mentioned earlier, though, if a student chooses completely not to engage and really isn't, working the program like we need them to, then they go back into collection and they will have, kind of had their opportunity. But we really try to avoid that with a lot of front-end coaching and a lot of front-end support. So we counsel them. They know exactly what will happen if they don't succeed in the program. They know exactly who to go to for help. And then we have a lot of adult engagement activities so that we're constantly touching base with them like every other week and trying to make sure that we don't lose them again. Because we know that these students are able to leave an institution because they've done it before. And so we want to make sure that they don't do it again.
So a related question we had from one listener is regarding who is paying for the student's debt and whether or not the school eats the cost or the state is paying for it.
So as I showed on the one slide with the scholarship, this is purely a tuition discount model for us. So we do not receive any outside funding for it. We have no philanthropic support for it. And so for us, we just know that we're going to write off. And it's really a sophisticated system. It's a spreadsheet. And so when a student enrolls, we put the amount of money that they owe each term, and every semester or every term that they complete, we just kind of cross off, that 1/3 of the debt that they owe. And at the end of 3 or, 3 out of the 4 terms, they're cleared. But that's how we do it. And that's what also calculates into that ROI. Even after we do that, I know you all in Ohio, your debt goes from the institution to the AG's office. We work with 3 separate debt collection agencies, and because we have contracts with them, we sometimes have to make them whole on the debt collection percentage. So if somebody owes $1,000 and maybe they get 1/3 of that for collecting, we actually pay them $333 to bring that debt back to the institution, so then we can erase it or write it off. Immediately when we bring that debt back, students see their credit scores go way up really quickly because that debt's just written off, and it looks like it's been paid off because we pay it off. And so that makes it really good for the students. But there's no scholarship for this. Nobody else is paying for this.
And John, I'd like to jump in on that just for Ohio, for those who would want some clarification. Under Ohio law, if an institution wants to do a discount on tuition, specifically the word discounting tuition, they need permission from the chancellor, so they'd have to apply, the institution would have to apply to the department. But in the context of the way that Dawn mentioned it and the way that could be structured, if it's really what's going on is the debt forgiveness piece, don't get mixed up in the terminology. Just call the department, talk to our legal counsel, talk through it, and we can talk to you about how to structure that.
And Dawn, I just wanted to raise a couple of statistics with my own question. Looking back at your slide, you had highlighted that there have been 191 students enrolled since the launch, and that the total return on investment to the university, even with paying the debt off, has been over $1 million. That's correct, right? Great.
That's correct.
Got it. So our next question, looking a little bit bigger, and this is probably a question for both Melanie and Dawn, but is Michigan, to your knowledge, looking at bringing this and scaling it statewide in some capacity, or are these compacts more regional?
So I think there's absolute potential to make it statewide. We have talked at length with the governor's office about this. They're very supportive. We have sort of a unique higher ed, very decentralized structure in Michigan, which I think has prompted us to take more of a regional approach, but definitely we've had interest from institutions across the state who are interested in doing debt forgiveness programs. You know, I hope we'll get there. I guess we're again racing each other to make that happen.
And then on a related note, let's see, are there business partners that are financially supporting students or offering to support the elimination of student debt in any of the programs? I'll even say in Michigan, or Melanie, are you aware of any programs that are doing that outside of Michigan, given your national knowledge?
Yeah, I'm glad, I appreciate this question because it warrants clarification. So our business partners have been supportive by providing like loan forgiveness, federal loan forgiveness programs and tuition support, not institution debt forgiveness. But I think just by anecdote, one of my most, I think the most compelling stories or case studies of debt forgiveness is a Warrior Way Back student named Shante Kane, who is a casino host who works the night shift, has been for 20 years. She was, I think, one class away from earning her degree. And yet her employer, MGM Grand, provided tuition assistance. So with the Warrior Way Back program, she was able to clear her debt that she owed. And then because of MGM Grand's support, was able to finish her degree, which was, you know, a lifelong dream of hers. We actually made a little video about her that I can put in the chat that I think is really amazing. But I think there's been a lot of sort of symmetry between what the corporations can do to support these adult students and what institutions can do. And they're sort of nicely complementary in that way.
So another question that we received is looking at a little bit bigger scope, thinking about kind of the challenges and some of the lessons that you've learned. Is there anything that you think that Ohio should be thinking about when they consider whether or not to implement something similar?
I can take us, Dawn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Still thinking, but you go
Okay.
first.
All right, I have a couple thoughts. So one is just, I would say this isn't specific about, this is sort of more about kind of assisting adult students generally. And I know you have a lot of experts. I've seen some familiar names in the panelist questions here. So I know you have a lot of experts there, but you know, national data shows that it takes about 14 touches for an adult to actually re-enroll. And so that takes longer than a year in most cases. And certainly if they have institutional debt, that requires a lot of assistance to kind of make that happen and kind of clear the way for them to re-enrollment process. And so I think the way Warrior Way Back has been designed, where they really have become a one-stop shop where every single need that an adult might have is met by like a single point of contact for them. We call, I think originally we were calling them like concierges almost for these returning adult students. I think that has been a key lesson. I think another kind of challenge we've confronted, and maybe Dawn wants to expand on this, is kind of differentiating between debt minimization and debt forgiveness. It's not enough just to do a one-off, one-time forgiving of this debt. Like there needs to be a concerted effort to have a comprehensive financial plan for these students, because we have seen cases where, you know, we forgive the debt of a student and, you know, 2 semesters later, they again have a financial hold on their account. And, you know, that's even, you know, more devastating than them being locked out of higher ed to begin with, right? If they fail again or we fail them again. So I think that is something we're really being conscientious about, is like how to, whether through a, combining completion grants with kind of the debt forgiveness to kind of make sure there's a bridge toward degree and credential completion, I think is an essential part of this.
So a couple things that I would add. Number one, the fact that you have champions already who are wanting to support you all doing this statewide is amazing. We started institutionally, regionally, and then we're expanding out from that. But to know, I'm watching the chat and I'm seeing all the state code and Mike's typing, and just to have somebody, kind of in your corner as you begin this work, I think is amazing. You need a champion on each campus, and that would be what I would suggest to you. And it doesn't matter if it's in your enrollment office, it doesn't matter if it's in your business office, if it's in your academic, maybe your provost, but you need somebody who has, a little bit of might behind them so that they can come in and go, we sat down and we had 43 people around a table and we said, how can we make this happen? Because we announced basically 11 days after I took the idea to the president and the CFO and the provost, and we were live. So I would not recommend that. I would recommend that you build your program before you actually announce your program, because we built it as we flew it, which was a little difficult, but you do need a champion, but those champions come from all different areas. I would also say, because of kind of the cohesion that you have coming out of Mike's office, you have a massive opportunity for shared marketing. And as Melanie and I have done this work and talked with folks, Tennessee has just been kind of a beacon of adult student re-engagement and shared marketing and how you all can promote as a state. And I think that's a much quicker and swifter lift than maybe, us coming at it from a regional perspective. The other thing that I would offer you is we have concierges on our campus, or that one person, but that person cannot be an entry-level first-time employee. You need somebody who has relationships on your campus. And so the person who's managing that for us is somebody who's worked on our campus for about 15 years. She's my direct report, and she's an enrollment management project director. And so she can reach out to somebody in financial aid, the bursar, academic services, advisor. So she runs that interference or that connection of bureaucracy that some of us have on our campuses to really make sure that the students know they have somebody in their corner. And one of the best things that one of our first students said to us is he knew that he had a whole team. Jonathan was featured on the Focus magazine for Luminate, and he said he knew he had a whole team and he knew that he could succeed, and that was really important. And so all of you have those people on your campus, and you also have people within your network in the state. And so I really think that Ohio is kind of ahead of the game, and it may actually be an easier lift. And I promise, Mike, that, and Melanie is committed as well, that we'll help. We'll help you all do whatever you need to do, because we do feel passionate about this and we want to see you and your students succeed in launching this program.
Mike, I feel like you were brought up a couple of times in the answer to that question. So I'd just like to see if you have any additional thoughts you want to add on to that.
No, I mean, I was really excited for this panel today because I think that it's a difficult conversation when you've never gone through it before. And for our stakeholders in Ohio to hear that it's worked mathematically and that it's been a win-win all around in Michigan has been really important. I think going to scale is something that is one of the questions that Jack Hershey has. And so I think that's, maybe we can address that next as well.
Yep. So jumping on to that, the last question that Jack posed, per Mike's reference, it sounds like, Dawn, the program has had 191 students so far that have taken advantage of it. Could you provide a little context for that number? Is it something that you're happy with, and how has it grown over time?
So we actually are pretty happy with it. As a traditional undergraduate focused, research one institution, this is a new way for us to interact. So we weren't necessarily set up in some of the same ways that our amazing community college partners were to really work with adult students. And so making sure that we're an adult-friendly institution, that we're able to schedule classes for students. Wayne State does not, up until COVID, we did not have an extensive online or remote delivery system for our courses. And so we, kind of had to work with students where they were, the courses that we had available, figuring out what degree programs. And up until, gosh, Melanie, was it 18 months ago? We didn't have kind of a general studies degree in our undergraduate, liberal arts and sciences college. So we've been kind of building our support for adult students in the back end as well. And those 191 students who are taking advantage of this program, we've had over 500 adult students re-enroll. In addition to this, they just didn't have previous past due debt. And what's really nice is because we have that 2-year stop out period, every semester, there is a new group of students that we can market to, that we can reach out to. And as Melanie said, 14 touches to get an adult student to re-engage. We have a lot of students that we've re-engaged with. We have over 100 right now who are completely, they've done everything they need to do. And we say that they're teed up. And we're just waiting for them to make the decision of when it's right for them to go back to school. And so they've done, they've got their debt in place. Maybe they were in federal loan default. We helped get them out of that. We've set them up with tuition reimbursement through their employer, whatever they needed. And so now we're just waiting for them to kind of go ahead and then jump with both feet in. So we're pretty pleased with it, especially given the scalability that we've been able to do with one staff member total. And then also what we've been able to do as far as supporting the students. And so I'd rather go smaller and be successful and make sure that those students have a really good experience than try to roll something out and fail and just leave them kind of hanging again. So we're good.
I think what I would add is I think we are definitely cognizant that the next frontier of this work is bringing this to scale, right? And to date, we have not done anything more than sort of traditional press and social media advertising of this. And we are very close to securing a large grant that will help us have a much more robust, sophisticated, and sustained outreach campaign, a regional one. And I think that will really help kind of increase the uptake of these programs at all our participating institutions. Because I think there's so many more students that could benefit from this. When we go back to, there was almost 25K students who had financial holds who could potentially benefit. So I think, our focus over the next year as we launch this marketing campaign will be to, increase the number of students who can take advantage of that.
And Mike, just flagging for you, we had another question in the chat specific to an Ohio question, but we just have actually one more that has been sent in via chat. So as we're answering this last question, please feel free to type any other questions that you may have in the chat. We'll make sure that they get answered. We have about 15 minutes left in our scheduled time. But this was a question specific to Oakland's ability to attract students, but I imagine that it would apply to all of the institutions involved here. So to both Melanie and Dawn, do you get the sense that if adult students knew of the program ahead of time, they would re-enroll knowing that if they were to get into financial trouble, they could easily return?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, I believe that it's kind of a question about would a student maybe game the system? Is that what you're thinking, John?
That's Jared, please feel free to type in the chat, but let's go with that because I know that was another question that we had wanted to address as well.
So we had, when we were starting to talk about this program, we had a lot of faculty members who mentioned, and then some folks in our billing offices, some of the finance, and they were very concerned that a student would come to Wayne State, they would enroll, and then they would drop out and be gone for 2 years and then come back so that they could, not have to pay that bill or that previous past due balance. And we, to date, have had 0 students do that. So students don't necessarily want to game the system as much as they want to get their degree. And so we do a lot of that pre-counseling as we're bringing students on board to make sure, as I said, they sign an agreement to make sure that, you know, we're all committed to the same goal. And so we haven't had that experience. But the other concern, and we didn't talk about this earlier, John, but I do just want to make mention, is sometimes people want to discuss about whether or not this is fair. And so they'll say, well, is that really fair to forgive students' debt? Because all these other students, you know, they didn't have debt and they went through and they didn't ask for forgiveness. So is it fair to do this? And my response is, don't be the person who asks if this is fair. It is right and just. And to help these students get their degree is what we need to do as a state for our economy. And, you know, some of us, and we really see Warrior Way Back as a social justice aspect of financial aid and student financial support. So they came to us and believed that they could be successful, and somewhere along the way that water was bad. And so it's not about what is fair, but it's about what we as an institution can do to help them get that degree. So we haven't had anybody you know, game the system. And we don't think that we will have any student, you know, game the system. But every time I give this chat, like in person, people will go, oh, but is that? And so I've now gotten, when I give the presentation, when I start off, I'm going, don't ask me if this is fair. This is what is right. And so that's a big difference for us. And I see Cindy ask if she could get a copy of the agreement. I'll put my email in the chat. Anybody who wants to email me, my enrollment management project director is Amanda Rosales. She has a whole packet of information that she will send out to anybody who wants it. So I'll put my email there and you can send it and we'll send you everything. So.
And I just wanted to comment. I see Jared actually clarified his question, and I guess the intention wasn't so much gaming the system, but rather just a demonstration of tremendous support that a university would show that would actually sort of buoy the student, you know, and help them have the confidence to take that step back, which I love that. So having worked closely with Oakland University, I think there's a few things I would attribute kind of the uptick of general adult re-enrollment to. I think first off, Oakland rolled out their debt forgiveness initiative alongside of 2 other scholarships. So they provided completion grants of, I think, also $1,500 to currently enrolled juniors or seniors who were at risk and kind of financially vulnerable. And they also had some sort of scholarship for students who did no debt but wanted to re-enroll. So I think that definitely contributed to it. I think the larger issue, though, I mean, if I were to kind of look at the macro trends, when you look at surveys of returning adult students, the number one sort of motivator for them is kind of their friends and their family who are their champions. And I think what a program like Warrior Way Back has done, or Oakland's is called Golden Grizzlies Graduate, what those programs do is they create buzz, right? And they have beneficiaries who are students who can speak firsthand about like how this has benefited their lives, and that is spread by word of mouth and sort of provides greater kind of confidence and excitement about kind of the adult student experience. And I think that is the primary reason why you know, Oakland has seen an uptick there.
I do want to add really quickly, my favorite students when they come in and they're trying to, you know, take advantage of this program and join it, is somebody will say, my aunt told me, or my uncle saw this, or my grandma told me. And so, you know, they have family support to really kind of nudge them along to re-engage and go ahead and get that degree. And I think that that's been probably one of the neatest things for us to see, is it does create that generational and multi-generational engagement with the institution to get students, you know, back in school and get them out on the other side with a bachelor's.
Well, we had 2 more questions come in, and I think my guess is after answering these, we might have time for one more. So feel free to drop the final question in if you would like. But the first one is, have you coordinated these efforts with other programs like Fresh Start? And I think this is specific to the GPA policies, or are the GPA policies distinctly related to system requirements or limits? My guess is, again, similar to the specific reason why you selected $1,500, for example.
So we do have a Phoenix program, and it had not been revised, I want to say, in 15 or 17 years, and that's kind of an academic fresh start program. And we are currently looking at that. But you'll notice in our requirement, it does say a student needs to have a 2.0. And so those programs right now basically are serving two different populations. So Warrior Way Back is for students who are academically eligible, but maybe financially not. And then where we have the Fresh Start program, those students do not owe a past due balance. So they are financially eligible, but not necessarily academically. And we are having conversations on our campus about how those two either walk in parallel with one another, or could there also be some overlap. But it does kind of boil down, and the financial aid folks on the call, they know that a lot of that academic fresh start can really affect a student's satisfactory academic progress when it comes to eligibility for federal programs. And so we do have to be really careful about that, but we are having those discussions as well.
And then we had another question about whether or not debt forgiveness applies to private loans. Mike, I know that you typed out a bit of a response there. And so first I just wanted to ask Mike, was there anything else you wanted to say on that point? And then Dawn and or Melanie, anything you want to say on that point as well?
Yeah, I'll be interested if there was any analysis of that in Michigan, because that would be interesting. The way that we think of it is institutionally held debt. So if it was a federal loan, for example, or a private loan, then presumably that money's been spent on the institution, and the institution doesn't have a credit that they're collecting against the student. And so there isn't a reason for the institution now to withhold the transcript or to block re-enrollment. The institution basically has no barrier with the student. The student may have past debt that they owe somebody else, the federal government or a private loan provider, but it's not a barrier to reentry for them in the college sense. If they owe the debt to the institution itself, though, and many institutions do extend the credit, then that becomes the barrier for transcript withholding, which is the key linchpin. And I think I would just want to emphasize that, number one, we could leave debt at the AG's office forever. We could continue to collect it. It can be litigated. There's a lot of powers that the AG's office has for debt collection in Ohio that don't exist when you talk about private credit collection. But the thing that really stops out the student, in my opinion, is the inability to get their transcript. Because if they don't have their transcript, then they can't complete the transcript with another institution or even with the same institution to continue and finish. And so that's institutionally held debt is the crux of the way that we look at this.
And I would agree. And we don't, we have very few institutional small private loans that we extend, but those would again fall into institutional debt for us, and they could be part of this program.
That includes, by the way, fines and penalties. So, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there's not exactly revised code around what the fine and penalty structure is in Ohio for what IHEs may charge. And so an IHE could, on a well-meaning basis, for example, with a library book that's not returned, impute a very large fee on that because they want to motivate students to return library books, right? And so the actual cost of the book might be the cap, or they may have some kind of strong penalty like a $100 fine if you don't return a book, that kind of thing. The way that it works in Ohio today is that institutions by and large are certifying the entire amount, including that fee, over to the Attorney General's office. And that was part of the 2017 report too, to say, generally speaking, since there's already kind of a fee that's attached when it goes to the AG's office, we should not be double charging the fee structure on the motivation for collection, and therefore try to not, if we can, not certify over that kind of debt. And the institutions have to control their own fee amounts and the way that they structure that and whether they certify that or just the principal amount.
And Mike, I would just add really quickly, we did an in-depth analysis at Wayne State, and we went and we looked at all of our holds, and we found over 80 holds that we had no way to clear. So they were like bad numbers. We were putting a hold on students' accounts for a math book that no longer existed and we hadn't used for 11 years. But if you hit an 8 instead of a 9, a student would get that hold, and there wasn't anybody who had the authority to clear it. So one of the things we did is we did that hold analysis, and then we also went back and we looked at what was true debt. So if a student owed us $50, but then we tacked on another 180, then we really did an in-depth analysis. Did we need to collect all those late fees? Did we really? And so we tried to be fair about that with the student and not just go ahead and compound interest and charge up on top of that. But those decisions about what became actual debt to be forgiven totally rested with our student accounts and our bursar office.
Well, we are almost at time, so I feel it's only fair to maybe give everybody 1 minute since it's 3:27, and we can go in the order that people presented. Melanie, Dawn, and then Mike. Any last words of wisdom or thoughts that you would like to share before we wrap up today?
Only that thank you for your interest in this topic. I mean, clearly it's one that's close to Dawn and my heart, and one that we think is a really compelling. So if there's anything we can do to support you all as you sort of stand up debt forgiveness in Ohio, we are here to assist.
So I will share. Melanie knows that I live my life by stories and analogies. And so as you're really thinking about this and as you're really thinking about changing, I would give you the analogy of a car. So when you go and you buy your car and you make all your payments and you own that car after it's paid off, what happens in higher education is if you need tires and you go buy tires, we don't repossess the whole car if you don't pay for the tires. However, if you have 7 semesters of college and you don't pay for that 7th semester, we go back and we repossess your entire education by holding that transcript. So I would challenge you in Ohio, you have, folks who want to support you in doing this. We've offered our resources, but really start thinking about how you can change the narrative and how you can do what's right by students. So if you remember 2 things from me, I want you to remember dead fish, and I want you to remember not repossessing the whole car. And I think if you do those 2 things, your students will benefit, and your enrollments will benefit, and your economy will benefit.
And the last thing that I would say, sorry, I was typing out an answer to Tammy because she wanted the revised code. Section 131.02 is the code section that allows the AG to work with the institution to compromise the debt for those who want that. And as a follow-up, I'd be happy to connect you with Michelle Chavon in our department to go through that. But my closing comment would be to say we're very fortunate that National Governors Association brought a convening and in a way that I don't think I would have stumbled upon Dawn or Melanie. Maybe later in the process. This happened earlier, and their enthusiasm is contagious for us. And I think it's a really nice offer, and I want to grab it while we have it, that the IHEs that want to rely on their expertise for free will be able to do so right now, and that we could try to get something, because I think if we can get anything going with just a few IHEs across the state of Ohio to a significant number, and then we build some experience and we get past that learning curve, I know that it'll grow, and I know that we'll be helping students. And so that's what we're really excited to do.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Melanie and Dawn, both for taking time out of your, what I'm sure are very busy days during these times to join us for this panel. We really appreciate it. Just as a quick reminder for anyone who is interested in reaching out to Dawn, she did drop her email address into the chat box. So before you log off, if that is something you are interested in, please make sure to go and grab that. And Mike also included a number of references to the various code pieces and some contact information for how you can reach out to his office as well. So with that, thank you everyone who joined us, and thank you for all of the wonderful questions. Melanie just dropped her email in the chat box as well, just flagging that for folks. But with that, we will conclude our session, and thank you all so much for joining us.